Welcome to Cliff Notes, the podcast where business meets inspiration and strategy meets balance. I'm Brandon Clifford, CEO of Business Alliance Inc., entrepreneur, investor, and your guide through the world of business, franchising, and leadership. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, aspiring franchise, or just someone looking for actionable advice to take your career to the next level, Cliff Notes is here for you. Join me as we break down the complexities of business and life into bite-sized, actionable insights. This is Cliff Notes, your shortcut to success. Welcome, everybody. How are you today? Thanks for joining us again. My name is Brandon Clifford. I'm your host here at Cliff Notes. I'm really excited for this episode of the podcast to bring in someone who I've known for a long time, a good friend, really an innovator, both in business and the franchising space, and also just an overall good person in life. And it's Ms. Rebecca Monet from Zorakle Profiles. Rebecca, CEO of Zorakle
There you
Profiles.
go. CEO, chief scientist. There you
Chief
go.
scientist,
Good to see you, Brandon.
founder, boss lady, lots of titles, right? People call you lots of things. What do you prefer to be called?
What do I prefer to be called? I haven't even thought about that. Probably chief insight officer. How's that?
Cool. I like it. I like it. I like it. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you coming on to share your story and your journey with our viewers and talk a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are with Zorakle. And I guess to kick things off, I know a lot of our listeners are in the franchise space, whether you're a broker or a franchise brand out there, you probably either met Rebecca or spoken to Rebecca. Hopefully you utilize her offering, Zorakle Profiles. But for those who maybe don't, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and how you got started in the franchise space?
So that's actually an interesting story, Brandon. Years ago, I was a therapist, and my clients were all entrepreneurs. That's all I worked with. So I didn't have folks with drug issues or alcohol issues or marital issues. We dealt with the issues between the two ears, the gray matter, technically, of what causes success in business. So I worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. And then one day, one of my clients says, Rebecca, can you share in a group situation what you were doing with me on a one-to-one in therapy? And I said, sure, we could do that, having never done anything like that before. And he put together 300 plus entrepreneurs in a hotel in downtown San Diego. It was the first time I had publicly spoken. And if you know my background as a missionary's daughter, and I was taught to be quiet and reserved and unassuming and all those things. So for me, this was the first time I spoke in public. And it was like duck to water for me. I absolutely thrived in that environment. And from there, my career went from one-to-one, what we called then therapy. Today, we'd probably call it coaching,
Sure.
right? It's a world. I started to teach these concepts of entrepreneurship and building a business all over the world.
Mhm.
And then one day, my kids, I was a single mama since my kids were 3 and 1, and they're now teenagers. And I realized one of the two children needed some eyes on her. She was starting to get a little bit rowdy at school, and I couldn't travel like I was doing before. So I went to bed and I prayed. Literally, that's what I did. And I said, God, what's next? I can't be traveling. My children need me here more often. And I woke up with 2 words, and they were as clear as day, Brandon. It was business broker. And I had never heard that term before. So I grabbed the yellow pages from above the refrigerator, because that's where you kept it, right? And I grabbed it down, business broker. There was 4 in San Diego, called each one of them. And I basically said, my name's Rebecca Monet. God told me to call you.
Hey, you got to act, right? You got to act. Yep. Go ahead.
And for sure.
Yes.
So naturally, 3 of the 4 thought I was absolutely nuts. And one said, sure, come on down. I basically offered to work and follow, and don't pay me. I just want to know what you're doing. And long story short, it was who I believe invented the idea of business brokering, franchise brokering. And he taught me a lot about franchising. His name was Howie Bassick. I'm sure you've
Mhm,
met him over the years.
mhm,
And I taught him everything I knew about the brain and psychographics.
mhm.
And that was my introduction into
Right. What a
franchising.
what a beautiful story. Go back a little bit. So did you go to school for to become a therapist, or like how did you
Yes,
get into
yes.
that field? Yeah.
Yeah. It was a love
Mhm,
that goes back since I was a kid when we moved from Switzerland
mhm,
to the US,
mhm,
when I'm still speaking primarily German at
mhm,
that time and some English, and I was put into schools, I instantly realized Americans were very different than the Swiss.
mhm,
And so I became insanely curious of how these kids were so different than I was and vice versa, right?
mhm,
So I was always fascinated with human behavior and how people considered things, made decisions, interacted. So it started at a very young age. So I knew I would go into the world of psychology. That there was no question about
mhm,
that.
mhm. Yeah, and trying to understand the way people think and like their decision making. Is it fear based? Is it what's their motivation? That's just always something that has been a passion of yours.
It has been,
Mhm,
and I'm really glad you brought up the fear thing,
mhm,
Brandon, because many people don't realize fear in and of itself is a motivator. It's
mhm,
something that moves us away from something. And then, of course, there are other motivators, our values that moves us towards things. But once we understand those things, we can better predict how someone's going to behave or how they think or where they're going to spend their money or how they're going to spend their time. We
mhm.
can know those things if we understand the inner workings of that individual.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you like then gravitated towards entrepreneurs because talk about a psychographic that's hard to understand. Because what's really interesting, in my opinion, about entrepreneurs and business owners, whether you're a solopreneur or you're like a off the reservation entrepreneur who comes up with some idea and launches a product, the Metas, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, whatever, or you're a franchisee who wants to be a business owner. It's interesting to think about how a lot of times one of the main motivations is like you hear people say, "Oh, I want to create jobs. I want to give opportunity." Like it's a give back, but they're very much like inside themselves. You could probably speak better to that, right? Do you see common characteristics like that of entrepreneurs?
I, I do. I do. And I think one of the big motivators is what you're talking about, where there's a desire to make a difference. That's what it was
Mhm.
for me. But
Mhm.
honestly, can be a different motivator for individuals and the different motivator through our life, meaning what drives us today may not be the same. But there are some common characteristics and common attributes that entrepreneurs have.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're born that way because that's the kind of an age old argument,
Mhm.
nurture versus
Nature. Mhm.
nature kind of argument. But I do think that there are different drivers for entrepreneurs and folks that choose a different path than that. Because it's a risky thing, right? You're
Mhm.
stepping into the unknown, especially if you're building something from scratch.
Sure.
That's a risky business.
Mhm. So you did that. You went up, you were so when you were, a therapist, were you a psychiatrist, psychologist, or just like a coach?
So, yeah, so
Mhm,
basically, just a therapist.
mhm.
I wasn't
And
a
so were you working
psychiatrist.
for a clinic or something at that
Yeah,
time?
I was part of a larger clinic, and that
Mhm,
clinic was very interesting
okay.
because it included everything from nutritionists to
Mhm,
chiropractors to medical doctors
mhm,
to osteopaths. We had just a diverse kind of holistic approach. Keep in mind,
mhm,
this was San Diego,
mhm,
and this was many years ago. So it was a holistic approach. And what I brought was the psychological
mhm,
uh, component to it. A lot of the business was other doctors making introductions.
mhm, mhm,
Here's a stressed out entrepreneur
mhm,
who has chronic headaches or stomach problems or whatever.
mhm,
And they realize it's not a physical thing, it's a
mhm,
psychological thing that is causing those physical things. They would come to me from those kinds of introductions, and then we would deal with whatever inner conflict was going on so they could get healthy, but then could go to the next step, build a business in a healthy, physical healthy, mentally healthy place. So they
Mhm.
didn't have these issues of health that was slowing them down.
Yeah, no, interesting. But in going from that environment, which is relatively safe, right? It's a job, you're working in a, even though you are independent, so you're already trending that way. But what inspired you could to, I don't know, step out of that safety net and create this assessment that now, what, 400, 500 franchise companies use and,
Yeah.
and probably thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs have taken. So what inspired you to create Zorakle?
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's an evolution. Initially, when I was introduced to franchise brokering and franchising, I was just insatiably curious about why someone would choose franchising rather than entrepreneurship or climbing the corporate ladder, as an example. So I had this insane interest and curiosity. But also, as a scientist, it was I was fascinated that I could take an individual, that I could give a set of psychographic assessments, and I could tell you a lot about that individuals and the challenges they were gonna have. But now I'm taking that same individual and putting them in a structure, in a system,
Mhm.
that is replicatable, scalable, the world of franchising. So now I was looking at what are some ways I could measure this other thing that was a living, breathing organism. It's a franchise, but
Mhm.
it's an organism that's evolving and changing. So I wanted to see how the 2 correlated and how one caused another thing. So I think it was just insane curiosity
Mhm.
initially. And in the early days, it was to help franchise brokers understand their candidate
Mhm.
and to get more people across the finish line.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as the years evolved, it became, wait a second, it's not just about getting someone to buy a business
Mhm.
because not everybody can do it. And there are companies that are better fit for certain individuals. So it
Sure,
became
sure.
more
No,
about,
and so, but this is just in case others don't know, if someone's listening to this, they never, and we're talking like, I know I'm very familiar with Zorakle. I've used it not only as a broker in the past, also when I was with a franchisor. And yeah, I used it. You know, it is a selling tool for sure. It helps you reassure what is a really hard, scary decision. But it also, at its core, it's a behavioral science indicator that this candidate will be one of your top franchisees, so why not use it? But can you, I guess you can probably explain better, how does Zoracle work? What is Zoracle Profiles and how does it work? Let's back up a little bit before we get into the nitty-gritty. Yeah.
yeah. So Zoracle is a profiling tool that franchisors and franchise brokers use to help facilitate a right fit between a prospective franchisee and a franchisor. So the assessment is based on 8 different statistically validated sciences. So it gives a deep understanding of a candidate so that broker and that franchisor can know that candidate is indeed a good fit for that organization. So we compare a prospective franchisee and all of their markers to the franchisors, franchisees that are doing well. So it
Mhm.
literally lets us know this candidate is a good fit for this company or not. Maybe they're a
Mhm.
better fit for a different company.
Yeah, and it's just a tool, and so it also reassure, like, for the franchisee, for the candidate, right? Like, I can, there's a lot of different variables. Obviously, you need to have the financial bandwidth to start this business. You need to have the time in your life that you're gonna invest. It also needs to be the right market for your business. But then really what makes or breaks, from my perspective, a business, right? It's if the owner, the boss, the head honcho, the one who's making the decisions, writing
Mhm.
the checks, paying the payroll, all that kind of stuff, if they really enjoy their job. If they don't like their job, it doesn't matter how much you like Jimmy John's subs. If you don't like being the owner of a sub shop, you're not going to be successful in that business, right? And so that's what Zorakle can do, is give you that reassurance that yes, you more than likely would enjoy this because your profile matches these other top franchisees in our system, correct?
Such a great point. Just because we're attracted to something and even maybe have a passion or love for it,
Hmm.
subs or
Sure.
painting or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be good at that
Hmm.
business or that we're going to enjoy that business. So the psychographics helps us determine using science if indeed this individual is going to be a good fit and enjoy what they're doing and retain and ramp up beautifully.
Mhm. So
We're
this
all
is really good. Let's
definitely
let's table the Zoracle like that the assessment conversation for a minute. Go back to your entrepreneurial journey, right? And so here you are, single mom, like you said, had been
mhm.
working in this clinic and had steady stream of clients and safe, and then you get this word from God, right? And go down this path. Insane curiosity leads you to franchising. You fall in love with franchising, and you're like, wow, this is the place for me. When you come up with this concept of how you can transfer your skills of what you did and create this company, Zoracle Profiles. So tell me about the entrepreneurial journey. Now you're launching it. Okay. No one knows Rebecca Monet. No one's heard of the Zora. People know the disc assessment. They know like there are some other behavioral, but nothing like specifically for franchising at that time, I believe. So I don't know, tell us a little bit about the startup phase. What was it like trying to get the name out there, make connections? Like what was I'm sure there's some obstacles and challenges maybe you faced and how
Oh
did you
my
overcome them?
gosh, challenges galore, Brandon. Keep in mind, this is 31, almost 32 years ago,
Mhm,
when franchising was still a bit of a wild west.
mhm, mhm,
And franchisors believed that they created this wonderful product, service, business model. If they put you in the right marketplace, right, and you found you the perfect location,
mhm.
that any monkey could run
Yeah.
that
They
business.
could teach a 5-year-old to run their business. Yeah.
There you go.
Mhm,
Exactly. So it was a belief system that we had to come up against 30 years ago to begin to demonstrate that not everybody can do every business just because they have money and you have territory and you have a great model. So it was obstacle after obstacle, and and it took education to get our franchisors to slowly see that maybe the human front-facing human was important. The
mhm,
franchisee was as important as the business model. Early days was a lot of poo-poo. So we literally had to approach it from a perspective of you can do more deals.
mhm,
Talking them into do the right deals took some time,
mhm,
and usually that happened with the bigger franchisors who were having some issues. They were having retention
mhm.
issues or validation issues or ramp up time or
Yeah, failures, right? Yep. Mhm,
yeah, they were having all kinds of issues. Now they go, "Maybe it's not us because clearly other people are being successful. It's
mhm,
gotta be the franchisee.
mhm.
It's about the fit, right?"
So let's
It
dive into that fit a little bit. Because, yeah, I totally agree with you. And like, at the end of the day, the franchisee is just as important as the franchisor, and the franchisor is just as important as the franchisee. Like it's not either or, it's both. It's both and, right?
I
And
love
so, how does Oracle help measure compatibility? Because I'm sure a lot of people are like, "Oh, this isn't even possible." So how does it measure compatibility between a candidate and a franchisor?
there are several markers to look for to determine compatibility, whether that's a marital compatibility, a friendship, a team player. In this case, a business partner in many ways. First is you have to assess the franchisor's values, what drives them, what motivates them. And once we understand the franchisor's values and the high performing franchisee's values, then we need to understand, does the prospective franchisee have similar values? The more aligned the values, the more harmonious that relationship is going to be, the better that franchisee is going to be in embracing complying with the systems that are available to them. But there's also huge financial correlations, like wearing the right pair of shoes. You can run further, do better when it's a good fit. And you always want to start with values. And then the second component of that, which is an offshoot, is the culture of that franchise system. So you want to define what that culture is, how the high performers are fitting within it, and then does our prospect fit within that culture? Sometimes poor performance or poor satisfaction, as you talked
Mhm.
about earlier, is I'm just not a good cultural fit,
Mhm.
right? And if you've
Mhm.
had jobs in the past, everybody has had that situation where wasn't the company, wasn't me. It was just I don't see the world the same
Yeah,
way
sure.
they see the world.
Now, what about because so like franchise brands, they go through evolutions, right? When you're first getting started, say you have a power washing company and you've grown locally, and then you get to the point where you have a system, maybe you have some sort of a proprietary machine that uses no chemicals and washes houses really fast, right? And you're
Yeah.
able to hide, so this is now you're okay. So this is repeatable. This is high margins. And you say, okay, people are asking me to go outside of my geographic area. I got to figure out how to expand. And you look at the different ways to expand. Either you're hiring GMs or whatever, and maybe you hire a couple GMs, and that helps for a little while. But then now you're like, if I want to continue to scale this business, I got to bring on partners, and so then you find
Right.
franchising, and so now you're like, okay, I'm gonna franchise this business. I don't know who my ideal fit. You have an idea, like you probably do. They usually advise them to like start with the founder? Is that who they base the initial assessment off of, or like how does an emerging brand use this, and then how does someone who maybe has 20 or 30 locations use this, and then we can talk about the big guys later.
The mega brands, yeah.
Sure.
So that's a great question because to your point, all companies go through predictable stages of growth. Their organizational structure is going to change, their initiatives are going to change, leadership and management is going to change. How formal their systems are will evolve as they grow. A private equity comes in, they make some changes. So there's always this evolution that every company goes through. So we want to make sure that the franchisee coming in fits in that franchisor's current stage of growth, and that evolves and changes. Now, the way we measure that is by doing an audit on the franchisor. We get the leadership team together and we do an audit. It's several questions that they will answer, and then we assess as many of their franchisees as possible. So that's easy if you have 30 plus franchisees, right? We can
Mhm.
quickly determine what the values are, what the cultures are, what the stage of growth is, what are the skills, both
Mhm.
soft and hard, necessary to grow the business if you have at least 30 plus franchisees. But if you're a baby Zor, is what I call them, the emerging Zor, you may not have 30 franchisees for us to really take a look at. In that case, we will still look, as you pointed at the leadership team. So will those first few franchisees are compatible with those
Mhm.
franchisees. We still do a franchise audit. And if you have no franchisees or one or two franchisees, then the software uses a modeling technique of 32 years of research on other franchisors with similar value packages, similar stage of growth, similar culture, and the algorithm is created for that ideal.
Mhm.
Now, when you grow, you wanna redo that because now you're learning with
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
and the algorithms will evolve and change for who's the ideal,
Mhm.
but there's still plenty of data for us to
Yeah, and did you always intend, because again, Zoracle's even evolved over the, I mean, it's 30 years. Did you always know, "Oh, we're gonna have to redo these algorithms every with so many franchises," or is that something you learned over the years?
It's that's an interesting question because I was observing it, but
Mhm.
I couldn't articulate it
Mhm.
for the longest time.
Mhm.
It wasn't until 2006, I'm like, something is going on because the franchisee that's fitting now when they have 122 franchisees
Mhm.
is different. So how, besides all the tools we're already using, how do we measure a franchisor's stage of growth?
Mhm.
Keeping in mind, size is not the only indicator.
Mhm.
It's how formal the systems are, et cetera. There's a bunch
Mhm.
of different markers. So it was more, I'm observing something
Mhm,
and I'm like, how do we measure it?
mhm,
So I went back to Neil Churchill's work, which was introduced to me in a economics class at university. And I started to study this model of economic systems, world politics, and how even countries and economic systems
mhm,
evolve.
mhm,
And I started studying that and really digging in, and then started to look at other research that says, okay, does this apply to
mhm,
businesses?
mhm,
Can we measure where the next crises they were gonna have, the next growing pain they were gonna have. So a
mhm.
lot of the work that we use with the stages of growth comes from Neil Churchill. That's where it started, and then other research. And then, of course, we created a tool that measures that for our franchisors
Mhm.
and then predicts if this candidate fits in that stage.
That's actually super cool. Because I mean, like the stages of growth of a franchisor are crucial, and oftentimes you do it. And I've seen it here recently in the last 2 or 3 years. It's really, I think, franchising in general has
Mhm.
elevated because they've started to realize that, and franchise franchisors are starting at a little bit of a higher level in many ways. Like they know they have to hire
Mhm.
for customer service, right? They have to have more trainers, better field
Yeah.
consultants, a better brand, better distribution models. They need to be thinking, okay, yes, I only have 10 franchisees today. And if this franchisee asks me to do something for them, I could probably do that for them, but can I do that for 50 franchisees? And can I do that for 100? Like, they're asking those questions way earlier, and I think part of it's the impact that Zoracle's had in the space to understand those things, and I love the roadmaps you lay out, and you're not just assessing potential candidates, you're also assessing the brand and telling them the stage of
Franchisor.
growth they're at. So I guess we're getting close to time here. And again, your entrepreneur journey, I want to make sure we focus on that quite a bit as well. So was there ever a moment, I'm sure there's many, where you felt like you couldn't handle it? So let's actually talk more about a moment when you felt like you got there, you made it. Can you think of, okay, I'm here?
Uh, I want you to ask every entrepreneur on your podcast going forward that question, because my belief, I don't know if it's true,
Mhm.
my belief is a true entrepreneur never arrives.
Love it.
They never are, for me,
Mhm.
it's always one more idea, one more product, one
Mhm.
more way that technology and science can help the world
Mhm.
of franchising. So I have not arrived.
Love it.
And I don't know when I will, and
Mhm.
my guess is I never will. I will always want more.
That's amazing. Yeah, if you is a great quote. How do you continue to gain momentum? It's by constantly raising your goals. And so with Zoracle, is there the next 10 years, are there any new developments coming out? Like where do you see the company? Are you gonna continue to stay in franchising, or do you think you might have applications to other industries, or where's the company headed?
We're working on a couple. We just launched Zorakle 2.0, which has all kinds of new features, so those of you that aren't already clients need to go check it out.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna go into the employee space.
Oh, neat.
It'll still be in the franchise space,
Mhm.
so franchisees who want to assess employees for
Mm.
a particular role, so that will we're starting on that work
Well,
come.
especially with like GMs and like managers, like that's huge, Rebecca. Wow.
Yes, it's gonna
Mhm.
be big. We've had that request for years. We already have a product, and we have several franchisees on it already, but it's gonna go bigger than that.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other thing is we're gonna roll out a coaching platform, so field coaches
Mm.
can look at the gap analysis of their franchisee compared to the ideals and high performers, and it'll provide some coaching methodology. It's gonna be all customizable. So that we're working on. And yes, we have looked at other verticals. It will still be the same kind of model. So dealerships, distributorships,
Mhm.
licensees,
Mhm.
where it's still an organization that gives you a certain amount of structure and you're building a business within that. So that could be stockbrokers, insurance agents,
Mhm.
realtors, or anyone that is like an affiliate or a licensee
Mhm.
selling products and services and operating under a bigger brand. So that's a huge marketplace. We're starting to play a little bit in the real estate space already. So we'll see that continuing as time goes on.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. In all your years of wisdom, all right, is I know we're getting towards the end of some kind of wrap up questions. What's one piece of advice you'd share with someone who maybe is in your shoes where you were 30 years ago, has an idea? How do you hash out, is this harebrained or should I go forward? What's your one piece of advice for an entrepreneur?
I think I learned this the hard way. I come from a family where love is performance based. You bring home A's, you do the dishes. It's
Mm,
you get love by performing. And so my whole life was I belong, I'm part of, I'm loved, I'm appreciated when I am performing. And what I found was I
mm,
burned out like a lot of entrepreneurs. So I had to reassess what my true motivator was
mhm,
and realign some of those values where it's not just about performance, but there are other motivators like fun or learning or creativity, some other motivators that would feed my soul rather than have me the energy all going one way. So don't have your identity or your sense of being appreciated attached to
mhm.
performance because it's going to burn you out.
Mhm. Yeah, no, definitely a danger that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into for sure, where their business eats them alive and keeping things rightly ordered in your life. And like, that's huge. And remember that at the end of the day, yeah, for eternity, your identity is not your business, right? Your
Right.
business might be important to you on this life. It's not in the next. And okay, cool. So I guess along those lines, you fun. What is there anything on your bucket list outside of work? Like, what's the one thing I know you want to try to hit in the next 5 years or even 20 years? What's on your bucket list?
I'm at a place where wealth is memories, right?
Mhm,
So for me, I am committed to creating memories for my children and my grandchildren. So every day is about that. How can we create another memory so when grandma's gone or mom is gone and my friends and family are left behind, they'll have these fabulous memories. So the one I'm currently working on is for my 19-year-old grandson who plays soccer.
mhm.
We are going to take him to see some of the games for the World Cup.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so I'm not sure where that's going to
Mhm,
be, whether it's going to be Toronto, Vancouver,
mhm,
Mexico. Not sure where it's
mhm,
going to be, but
mhm.
that's a real close bucket list that we have.
Very cool. Yeah, that'd be amazing. That's great. And another, just a kind of another fun question I like to ask any guest here because I'm a book nerd. I don't know, like readers, right? Leaders or readers, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
also I do a lot of philosophical, spiritual reading, other things too outside of because I think that's important too. So, any good books you're reading lately that you want to recommend?
So there's one I'm reading. It's called The Power of Habit. Because of the energy that goes out every single day, I'm learning that the more things that I can take to habit, where I don't have to put it on my to-do list, I don't have to think
Hmm.
about it. These are just habits like brushing your teeth or
Yes.
whatever, that is freeing me up to do more important things. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been chunking down my life and saying, what can be moved to a habit
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have to remind myself to go to the gym. It's just
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the rhythm, the routine. It's the old desert fathers, right? They had a saying. It said, if you keep the rhythm will keep you. That's the desert fathers.
that's beautiful. I
Mm,
like that because
yes.
that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. Okay. Final word. Last 30 seconds here. Anything else you want to say? Oh, definitely share website. How do they find Zorakle? Let's share that stuff before we end. So how can someone find more about Zorakle if you'd like to share? What's the contact?
So go to zoracleprofiles.com. Keep in mind, Zoracle
That's
is now spelled
Zorakle.
pink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
And
put
of
that
course, you can
that
find
link
me on
somewhere in
LinkedIn.
here. Zoracleprofiles.com. Zorakle.
L-E.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm,
So that's the best way. And of course, on LinkedIn, you can
mhm,
reach out to us there
mhm.
also.
Excellent. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come here, and I hope you all found this valuable. If you did, definitely subscribe and share this with a friend. I'm looking forward to having more great content coming your way. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Business Alliance Insights. I hope you're walking away with some valuable insights to help grow and strengthen your business. If you're looking to connect with other business leaders, franchisors, franchisees, brokers, or even just looking to explore more tools to scale your business, be sure to get connected to our BAI network and check out FranLink, our exclusive social media platform built solely for our members. You can learn more about it and everything Business Alliance Inc. has to offer by visiting businessallianceinc.com. Again, that's businessallianceinc.com. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with other business leaders who are ready to take their businesses, their brands to the next level.